Hi folks, this is Jason and hope you are okay today. We're looking at the early dates of the New Testament. The picture before you is Dr. Wallace. He is a world-renowned scholar in ancient New Testament documents, and just to remind you of the scholarly work that many people are doing today. But we're going to be not talking about the manuscripts today. We're going to be talking about the dates, for the New Testament. That is it possible to have early dates for the New Testament? Because the critics will tell you, some extreme critics will tell you that the writers of the Gospels, the writers of Paul's epistles didn't write them, and these books are late dates and they're not accurate historical. But if we can show that these books were written earlier than the skeptics are saying, then it shows that they were written by the people who said they were written. So you have the Gospel of Luke and you have the book of Acts. And we know that the Gospel of Luke was written first, and then the Gospel of Acts, where we read former account, all that Jesus began to do and teach, Acts chapter 1 verse 1, referring to Theophilus. So the point being that the book of Acts is referring to a former book, which we know is the Gospel of Luke. Now the main couple of reasons why we know the book of Acts was written before AD 70. It doesn't mention the fall of Jerusalem. It doesn't mention the Jewish war in 66. It doesn't mention the deterioration of Christian relations with the Roman Empire. There's no mention of James' death. And because of these reasons and many other reasons, it's quite clear that the book of Acts was written before AD 70. Now, if the book of Acts was written before AD 70, it means the book of Luke was written before AD 70. If Luke came before Acts, and we can verify Acts was written prior to AD 70, it verifies Luke. So when Luke writes in chapter 1 verse 1 to 4, many have undertaken to draw up a record of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Therefore, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, it seemed good also to me to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. The next one is 1 Corinthians. We're going to look at that now, but before we do that, the point that I want to make here is Luke is saying in the Gospel of Luke that he has looked at the eyewitness accounts and written his Gospel. So we know that if he wrote that Gospel before he wrote the book of Acts, which we know because in the book of Acts it says at the beginning of chapter 1 about a former treatise. If we can verify the book of Acts prior to AD 70, it means that when Luke is saying he's studied the eyewitnesses, he was certainly around and able to investigate those eyewitnesses. Okay. The next early date is 1 Corinthians. We know that this was written round about 55 to 56 AD. The book claims to be written by Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 1, 12, 17, 3 and 4, etc. references by Paul. There are some similar ideas in that book, similar to the book of Acts. Paul mentions 500 eyewitnesses that were still around at the time, so that means an early date. And the book, the letter of the book and the culture of the book harmonizes with the Corinthian culture of that time. Some very powerful incidental evidence proves that it's an early date is in the Epistle of Corinthians chapter 47 by Clement. He refers to this epistle. We also have Barnabas, the Epistle of Barnabas points to it in the book in chapter 4. The Shepherd of Hermes also points to the book in the chapter 4 of that book. And if we look at Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, there are at least 600 quotes of the book, which clearly shows that that Corinthians was written very early on, around about 55 AD. And so that brings us to 2 Corinthians and Galatians, which also have been well attested as historical early dates. Scholars are becoming, more and more scholars are moving over to believing early dates of the New Testament. William F. Albright says, "We can already say emphatically that there is no longer any basis for dating any book of the New Testament about AD 80, 2 full generations before the date between 130 and 150 given by the more radical New Testament critics of today." That's in Recent Discoveries in the Bible Lands. Albright said, "In my opinion, every book of the New Testament was written by a baptized Jew between the 40s and 80s of the first century, between AD 50 and 75. Albright did research in Qumran and said that there are a number of key concepts in Qumran that can be traced in the Gospel of John, which puts John to an early date. John A. T. Robinson, also a skeptic, has also put early dates to Matthew to 40 to 60 AD, Mark from 45 to 60 AD, Luke from 57 to 60 AD, and John at 40 to 65 AD. Some of the great evidences for early church, the early dates of the New Testament is this incredible piece of information. There are all by the early church fathers. Now get this. Now the early church fathers are like the second generation leaders after the apostles, and leaders after them, the sort of first leaders after the apostles. Now get this fact. These next generation leaders after the apostles, or second and third generation, sorry, now get this, this is staggering, give over 19,368 citations of the four Gospels alone. 268 by Justin Martyr, who lived 100 to 165 AD. 1,308 by Irenaeus, round about late 2nd century. 1,700 quotes the Gospels by Clement of Alexandria, who lived around about 155 to 220 AD. 9,231 quotes of the Gospels by Origen, who lived at 185 to 254 AD. 3,822 references to the Gospels by Tertullian, from 160 to 220 AD. And 734 quotes by Hippolytus from 236 AD, and 3,258 quotes of the four Gospels by Eusebius, 265 to 339 AD. Those are absolutely staggering statistics. We have P52 papyri, which dates from about 117 to 138 AD. Jose O'Callaghan, Spanish Jesuit paleographer, found some manuscripts in around about March 18th, 1972, fragments of the Qumran, Dead Sea Scrolls. Found a little piece of the Gospel of Mark in Cave 7. Research that he did, he was able to date them to about AD 50, the fragments. Putting all this evidence together is strong evidence for an early dates of the New Testament books. So I hope that's been a blessing to you. And so when you hear the atheists, skeptics, the Muslims saying all this stuff, just remember those staggering statistics that I gave you. Absolutely demolish anybody who might say that the Gospels shouldn't have early dates. They should have early dates. The evidence for it, early dates, is absolutely astounding. And any scholar in the modern world today, I don't care what reputation you have as a professor, you're being truly intellectual and anti-scientific if you're denying all that wealth of evidence. If you put late dates or even medium dates on the New Testament, you simply need to be intellectually honest and revise your position. Okay, thank you for listening and take care.